The gunshot echoed through the quiet suburban street like thunder splitting the sky. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson collapsed onto the pavement, his hand instinctively moving to his chest where blood was already seeping through his civilian clothes. The late evening air hung heavy with the acrid smell of gunpowder as Officer Derek Hutchinson stood frozen, his service weapon still smoking in his trembling hand. "Stay down. I said stay down." Hutchinson's voice cracked with a mixture of adrenaline and something darker, something that had been festering for years beneath his badge. Marcus struggled to breathe, each gasp feeling like fire in his lungs. Through the haze of pain, he could see neighbors emerging from their homes, phones raised, recording everything. His vision blurred as he tried to focus on the officer standing over him. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in his own neighborhood. Not to him. Just 30 minutes earlier, Marcus had been laughing with his 8-year-old daughter Emma at their kitchen table, helping her with homework. He'd been home for only 3 days after a 6-month deployment in Eastern Europe, where he'd led a battalion of over 500 soldiers. He'd survived combat zones, political tensions, and the weight of command. He never imagined that the real danger would be waiting for him on American soil, on his own street. The dispatch call had come through to Officer Hutchinson at 7:45. A suspicious person walking through the neighborhood. Marcus had simply been taking his evening walk, something he'd done countless times before. He'd been wearing jeans and a hoodie against the October chill, lost in thoughts about readjusting to civilian life, when the patrol car's lights suddenly flooded the sidewalk behind him. What happened next had escalated with terrifying speed. Now, lying on the cold concrete with his life bleeding out onto the street he'd walked 1,000 times, Marcus felt his phone vibrating in his pocket. His wife Sarah was probably wondering why he was taking so long. Emma would be waiting to show him her finished math worksheet. The battalion he commanded was expecting him back at Fort Bragg in 2 weeks. None of that seemed to matter anymore as darkness crept into the edges of his vision. But what Officer Derek Hutchinson did, the emergency room at St. Michael's Hospital erupted into controlled chaos the moment the paramedics wheeled Marcus through the automatic doors. Dr. Jennifer Walsh took one look at the gurney and immediately began barking orders to her team. She'd been an ER surgeon for 15 years, and she knew a critical gunshot wound when she saw one. Single GSW to the upper left chest, possible lung involvement, BP dropping, the lead paramedic rattled off as they transferred Marcus onto the surgical table. Patient is a 42-year-old male, semi-conscious, lost approximately 500 milliliters of blood at the scene. Marcus's eyes fluttered open as the bright hospital lights assaulted his vision. The pain was overwhelming now, no longer dulled by adrenaline. He could hear the medical team working around him, feel hands pressing, prodding, inserting lines into his arms. Someone was cutting away his hoodie and shirt. "Sir, can you hear me? What's your name?" Dr. Walsh leaned over him, her voice calm but urgent. "Thompson," Marcus managed to whisper. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson. U.S. Army." Dr. Walsh's eyes widened slightly. She'd treated plenty of veterans before, but an active-duty lieutenant colonel shot in his own neighborhood was something else entirely. "Okay, Colonel. We're going to take care of you. Do you have any allergies we should know about?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone, now in a plastic evidence bag held by a police officer standing nearby, began ringing. The name flashing on the screen read, General James Mitchell. The officer stared at it, uncertain what to do. 12 miles away, General James Mitchell sat in a private dining room at Romano's Steakhouse, his phone pressed to his ear as the call went to voicemail for the 3rd time. Something was wrong. Marcus always answered his calls. They'd been friends for 23 years, ever since they'd gone through basic training together as young recruits with dreams bigger than their circumstances. They'd served in Iraq together, Afghanistan together, climbed the ranks side by side. James knew Marcus better than he knew his own brother. "Everything all right, General?" Colonel Patricia Hughes asked, noticing the concern on Mitchell's face. "It's Marcus Thompson." General Mitchell's boots struck the hospital floor with deliberate precision as he approached the nurse's station. The young woman behind the desk looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of the military entourage bearing down on her position. She'd seen plenty of worried families in her 5 years working the ER, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson. Where is he?" Mitchell's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Sir, let me check." The nurse's fingers fumbled across her keyboard. "He's in surgery right now. Or 3. But I can't give out information to anyone except immediate family." "I'm his emergency contact," Mitchell interrupted, pulling out his military ID and a document he always carried. "Check his service records. I'm listed as his secondary next of kin for military purposes. Now tell me his status." Captain Stevens had approached cautiously, recognition dawning on his face as he took in the stars on Mitchell's shoulders. A two-star general didn't show up at a hospital for just anyone. He'd made a terrible miscalculation about exactly who Officer Hutchinson had shot. "General, I'm Captain Ron Stevens with the Riverside Police Department. I'm supervising this incident, and I assure you we're conducting a full investigation." Mitchell turned slowly, fixing Stevens with a stare that had made hardened soldiers reconsider their life choices. "Captain Stevens. Where's the officer who shot Colonel Thompson?" Stevens gestured toward the bench where Hutchinson sat, now looking considerably smaller than he had 30 minutes ago when he'd been standing over Marcus with a smoking gun. "Officer Hutchinson is cooperating fully with our Internal Affairs Division. He's been placed on administrative leave pending." "Administrative leave?" Mitchell's voice dripped with contempt. "Your officer shoots an unarmed man in his own neighborhood, and he gets a paid vacation. Is that how this works?" "General, with respect, we don't know all the facts yet." "I know the facts." Colonel Hughes stepped forward, holding up her phone. "I've just watched cell phone footage from 3 different witnesses. All of it crystal clear. Your officer approached Colonel Thompson without cause, escalated the situation without justification, and fired his weapon at an unarmed man who was complying with his orders. Would you like me to send these videos to you, Captain? Or should I send them directly to the FBI's Civil Rights Division? Because I have their director's personal number, and he owes me a favor." The color drained from Stevens's face. This wasn't going to be like other incidents that got quietly swept under the rug or dragged out until public attention moved elsewhere. This was different. Mitchell took the phone, his expression hardening again. "Chief Hammond? This is General James Mitchell. I'm going to make this very simple for you. One of your officers shot an unarmed Army lieutenant colonel in his own neighborhood approximately 1 hour ago. I currently have cell phone footage from multiple witnesses, and I'm prepared to turn this over to federal authorities if I don't see immediate action from your department. I want Officer Hutchinson arrested and charged tonight. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight." Whatever Chief Hammond said on the other end made Mitchell's jaw clench tighter. "Chief, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. This isn't going to go away. This isn't going to blow over. You have one chance to do the right thing, and that chance is right now. Because if I have to go over your head, I will. And trust me, you don't want that. Now, I want to pause for just a moment. If you're watching this and you're feeling the tension, the anger, the hope that justice will be served, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Stories like this need to be told, and your support helps us keep bringing you real, powerful content. And drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Are you in the States? Somewhere else in the world? We want to know our audience." Mitchell ended the call and handed the phone back to Martinez. "He's stalling. Wants to wait for the investigation to conclude. Typical." "Then we don't wait," Senator Dawson said firmly. "I'm calling the Attorney General. If the local authorities won't act, the federal government will." As the senator stepped away to make his call, Mitchell looked back toward the surgical wing where Marcus was fighting for him. Chief Robert Hammond arrived at St. Michael's Hospital 45 minutes later, and the tension in the waiting room became thick enough to cut with a knife. He was a large man in his late 50s, with silver hair and a face that had seen too many press conferences defending officers who probably shouldn't have been defended. He walked in with 2 of his deputy chiefs and the department's legal counsel, a thin woman named Rebecca Torres who looked like she already knew this was going to be the worst night of her career. General Mitchell stood as they entered, his officers flanking him like a military tribunal. The visual alone sent a message: this wasn't a negotiation between equals. This was a reckoning. "General Mitchell," Hammond extended his hand, but Mitchell didn't take it. "Chief Hammond. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries and get straight to business. Your officer shot an unarmed man tonight. A decorated military officer. I want to know what you're going to do about it." Hammond's hand dropped awkwardly to his side. "General, I understand you're upset, but we have procedures. Internal Affairs is conducting a full investigation. Officer Hutchinson's body camera footage is being reviewed, witness statements are being collected." "His body camera that he conveniently didn't activate until after he'd already shot Marcus?" Colonel Hughes interjected sharply. "The one that doesn't show the actual shooting? We've already pulled the records request, Chief. We know the camera was off during the critical moments." Hammond's jaw tightened. "There may have been a technical malfunction." "There was no malfunction," Mitchell cut him off. "There was a choice. Your officer chose not to activate his camera before approaching a citizen. He chose to escalate instead of de-escalate. He chose to shoot instead of assess. And now you're choosing to protect him instead of holding him accountable. I'm here to tell you that those choices end tonight." Rebecca Torres stepped forward, her voice carefully professional. General, with all due respect, the military has no jurisdiction over local law enforcement. While we sympathize with your concern for your colleague, this is a matter for the civilian justice system. Senator Dawson had been standing quietly to the side, but now he moved into the conversation like a chess piece sliding into checkmate position. Ms. Torres, you're absolutely right. The military has no jurisdiction over local law and within minutes, 3 local news vans were parked outside, reporters scrambling to set up their equipment. Someone had tipped them off, and now this wasn't just a private confrontation anymore. This was going to be on the evening news. Chief Hammond saw the cameras and closed his eyes. This was spiraling out of control faster than he could manage it. Every instinct told him to protect his officer, to close ranks, to weather the storm like they'd done before. But this time felt different. This time, he wasn't just facing angry community members or civil rights lawyers. He was facing the United States military, a senator with federal connections, and a media circus that was just getting started. "Give me 24 hours, Hammond said finally. "Let me review the evidence properly. Let me talk to the district attorney. If everything is as you say." "If?" Mitchell's voice rose. "There's no if, Chief. The evidence is clear. The witnesses are unanimous. Your officer is guilty, and you know it. The only question is whether you're going to do the right thing or whether we're going to have to force your hand." Inside the ICU, Marcus was beginning to emerge from anesthesia. His eyes fluttered open, the world swimming in and out of focus. He could hear the steady beep of monitors, feel the tubes in his arms and the breathing apparatus helping his damaged lung. Pain radiated through his chest, but through the haze, one thought dominated: he'd survived. He'd been shot, and he'd survived. A nurse noticed him stirring and leaned over his bed. "Colonel Thompson? Can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You're safe now. You made it through surgery." Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The nurse held a small sponge to his lips, moistening them. "Your wife has been called. She's on her way. And there's a general outside who's been very insistent about seeing you. James." Of course James would be here. Marcus felt a wave of emotion wash over. Sarah Thompson burst through the hospital doors at 9:37, her face streaked with tears, her hands shaking as she clutched her phone. She'd left Emma with her sister, promising her daughter that Daddy would be okay even though she had no idea if that was true. The drive to the hospital had been the longest 20 minutes of her life, every red light feeling like torture, every mile stretching into eternity. General Mitchell saw her immediately and crossed the waiting room in 3 long strides, catching her as her knees buckled. "Sarah. He's alive. He made it through surgery. He's going to be okay." Sarah collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "They shot him, James. They shot my husband for walking. Just walking." I know. Mitchell held her, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. "But he's strong. He's going to pull through this. And I promise you, the people responsible are going to pay." Colonel Hughes approached gently, offering Sarah a bottle of water and a tissue. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Colonel Patricia Hughes. I served with your husband in Afghanistan. He saved my life during a supply convoy ambush. I want you to know that everyone who knows Marcus is behind you. You're not alone in this." Sarah wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "Can I see him? The doctor said he'll be moved to ICU soon. You'll be able to sit with him then." Mitchell guided her to a chair. "Sarah, I need to ask you something. Did Marcus mention anything about problems in the neighborhood? Anyone giving him trouble? Anything that might have led to this?" Sarah shook her head. "Nothing. We've lived there for 6 years. The neighbors love him. He helps Mrs. Chen with her groceries every week. He coaches Little League in the summer. Everyone knows him, James. Everyone knows he's in the army." Her voice broke again. How could this happen? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable because everyone in that room knew exactly how it could happen. It happened all too often. It happened to men like Marcus who dedicated their lives to serving their country, only to be treated like criminals in their own neighborhoods because of the color of their skin. Across the waiting room, Officer Hutchinson sat with his head bowed, listening to everything. Each word was like a hammer blow. He'd seen Marcus's wedding ring when he was on the ground. He'd heard him say he was in the army. But in that moment, clouded by fear and prejudice and poor judgment, none of it had registered. Or maybe it had registered and he'd simply ignored it, his implicit biases overriding his training and his humanity. Chief Hammond returned from making another phone call, this time looking resigned. "General Mitchell, the district attorney." A tear rolled down Marcus's cheek. "I just wanted to take a walk in my own neighborhood. I just wanted to come home from deployment and be with my family. Is that too much to ask?" "No," Mitchell said firmly. "It's not. And the fact that you're lying in this hospital bed for doing exactly that is an outrage that's going to have consequences. Real ones. A nurse appeared at the door. I'm sorry, but you need to let him rest now. His blood pressure is elevating. Sarah leaned down and kissed Marcus's forehead. I love you. I'm going to be right outside. Emma and I will be here first thing in the morning. Love you too, Marcus whispered. Tell Emma Daddy's okay. Tell her I'll be home soon. As they left the room, Mitchell's phone buzzed with multiple messages. He checked them quickly, his expression hardening with each one. What is it? Sarah asked. Officer Hutchinson's service record. One of my people pulled it. 3 excessive force complaints in 5 years. 2 dismissed, 1 settled quietly by the city. He's been to remedial training twice for improper use of force. This wasn't a one-time mistake, Sarah. This was a pattern that everyone ignored until it was too late. Sarah's grief transformed into fury. They knew he was dangerous and they kept him on the street? It gets worse. One of the complaints was from another black man who said Hutchinson racially profiled him during a traffic stop. The department found insufficient evidence to sustain the complaint. Mitchell's jaw clenched. They created this situation. They enabled him. And now Marcus is paying the price. They returned to the waiting room to find it in chaos. More news. The emergency city council meeting convened at 11:15 that night in a packed chamber that hadn't seen this much activity in years. Mayor Patricia Okonkwo sat at the head of the table, her face drawn and tired, knowing that the next few hours would likely define her entire political career. She'd been mayor for 3 years, elected on promises of police reform and community healing. Now those promises were being tested in the most public way possible. Chief Hammond sat to her right, flanked by his legal team. To her left sat the district attorney, Michael Chen, a man known for his careful, methodical approach to justice. Behind them, the gallery was filled with reporters, community activists, and concerned citizens who'd rushed to City Hall when they heard about the meeting. And in the front row, impossible to miss, sat General James Mitchell, Senator Richard Dawson, and 3 colonels in full dress uniform. Their presence alone sent a clear message: the military was watching, and they weren't going anywhere. Mayor Okonkwo called the meeting to order, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. We're here tonight to address the officer-involved shooting that occurred at approximately 7:53 this evening. Chief Hammond, please provide your report. Hammond stood, shuffling papers that everyone knew he hadn't had enough time to properly review. At 7:45, Officer Derek Hutchinson responded to a call about a suspicious person in the Riverside neighborhood. When he arrived on scene, he encountered an individual matching the description provided by the caller. What description? Someone shouted from the gallery. Hammond paused. A male in dark clothing walking through the neighborhood. That's not a description, another voice called out. That's an excuse. Mayor Okonkwo banged her gavel. Please hold your comments for the public comment period. Chief, continue. Officer Hutchinson approached the individual, later identified as Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson. According to Officer Hutchinson's statement, he perceived a threat and discharged his weapon once, striking Colonel Thompson in the upper chest. Colonel Thompson was transported to St. Michael's Hospital where he underwent emergency surgery. The sanitized language, the passive voice, the careful avoidance of the word shot instead of discharged his weapon, it all made Mitchell's blood boil. This was the language of cover-up, of institutional protection, of a system more interested in defending itself than serving justice. District Attorney Chen stood next. My office has been reviewing the evidence for the past 3 hours. We have witness statements, cell phone footage from multiple angles, and Officer Hutchinson's preliminary statement. Based on what I've seen so far, there are serious questions about whether this shooting was justified under the law. A murmur rippled through the chamber. For a DA to make such a statement this early in an investigation was significant. It meant the evidence was overwhelmingly bad for Hutchinson. However, Chen continued, I need to complete a thorough investigation before making any charging decisions. This is not something we can rush, despite the understandable emotions surrounding this case. Mitchell stood up, his uniform commanding immediate attention. Mayor Okonkwo, may I address the council? The mayor hesitated. This was highly irregular. But she also knew that refusing a 2-star general in front of television cameras would be political suicide. The council recognizes General Mitchell. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief. Mitchell's voice carried through the chamber with the authority of a man accustomed to commanding thousands. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson is not just a victim of a police shooting. He's a decorated combat veteran who has served this country for 21 years. He's led soldiers in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Eastern Europe. He's saved American lives and advanced American interests in some of the most dangerous places on earth. And 3 days ago, he came home to his family, to his community, to the country he swore to defend. Mitchell paused, letting his words sink in. Tonight, he was shot by one of the people he spent his entire adult life protecting. He was shot while unarmed, while complying with orders, while committing no crime whatsoever. And now I'm told we need to wait for a thorough investigation before. The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. And the military had been quietly building a case all along. Mayor Okonkwo's face had gone pale. Chief Hammond, is this true? Have there been other complaints? Hammond looked trapped. There have been misunderstandings. But nothing rose to the level. Nothing rose to the level until tonight, when one of your officers put a bullet in a lieutenant colonel's chest, Mitchell interrupted. How many more misunderstandings were you willing to tolerate before someone got killed? The chamber descended into chaos. Reporters were frantically typing. Activists were chanting. Council members were arguing among themselves. Mayor Okonkwo banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Finally, District Attorney Chin stood up, raising his hands for quiet. I've heard enough. Based on the evidence currently available, my office will be filing charges against Officer Derek Hutchinson tomorrow morning. Attempted murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and civil rights violations. He will be arrested and processed through the system like any other defendant. The announcement landed like a bomb. Hutchinson would be arrested. Actually arrested, not just given a desk assignment or put on leave. This was unprecedented. Police officers in this county were almost never charged, let alone arrested, for on-duty shootings. Hammond shot to his feet. District Attorney, you can't be serious. You haven't completed your investigation. I've seen enough, Chief. I have multiple witnesses, clear video footage, and an officer with a history of excessive force complaints. Any other citizen would have been arrested at the scene. The only reason Officer Hutchinson isn't in custody right now is professional courtesy, and frankly, that courtesy has expired. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's position? If you were just taking a walk and suddenly found yourself facing down a police officer who'd already decided you were guilty of something? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story is making you feel something, if it's making you think, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like this matter, and your engagement helps us tell more of them. Senator Dawson's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and a small smile crossed his face. Mayor Okonkwo, I've just been informed that the president will be addressing this incident in his press briefing tomorrow. He'll be calling for a comprehensive review of how law enforcement agencies interact with military personnel and their families. The president. The situation had escalated all the way to the Oval Office. Mayor Okonkwo knew in that moment that her city would never be the same. This would be studied in police academies and law schools. This would be referenced in civil rights cases for years to come. The shooting of Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson would become a watershed moment. In the back of the chamber, a young reporter named Jessica Martinez was live-streaming the entire meeting. Her stream had over 50,000 viewers and climbing. The story was spreading across social media like wildfire, with people from all walks of life weighing in. Veterans groups were organizing protests. Civil rights organizations were mobilizing. And ordinary citizens were demanding to know how something like this could happen. Back at the hospital, Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, unaware of the firestorm his shooting had ignited. Sarah sat beside his bed, holding his hand, whispering prayers and promises that everything would be okay. In the waiting room, members of Marcus's battalion had begun arriving, still in uniform, having driven hours from Fort Bragg the moment they heard what happened. They stood in silent vigil, a reminder that the military took care of its own. As the city council meeting finally adjourned after midnight, General Mitchell stood on the steps of City Hall, surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust toward him, and questions came from every direction. General Mitchell, what message do you want to send tonight? Mitchell looked directly into the cameras, knowing his words would be broadcast across the nation. The message is simple. The United States military will not tolerate our service members being victimized when they return. 3 weeks later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Marcus Thompson's home as he sat at the kitchen table with Emma, helping her with homework just like he'd done the night he was shot. But everything was different now. He moved slowly, carefully, his chest still healing from the surgery. The bullet wound was a constant reminder of that terrible night, a scar he'd carry for the rest of his life. Emma looked up from her math problems, her young face carrying a seriousness that no 8-year-old should have to bear. Daddy, when you go back to work, will you be safe? Marcus pulled her close, ignoring the twinge of pain in his chest. Baby girl, I'll always do everything I can to be safe. And I'll always come home to you. I promise. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching them, her eyes still haunted by how close she'd come to losing her husband. The last 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, physical therapy, media attention, and legal proceedings. Their quiet life had been turned upside down, but they'd survived. Together. The television in the living room was playing the morning news, and Marcus's story was still dominating the headlines. The footage of his shooting had been viewed over 50 million times across various platforms. It had sparked protests in 30 cities. It had inspired new legislation in 3 states. It had become a rallying cry for police reform and civil rights advocacy. On the screen, a news anchor was providing an update. In a stunning development, former officer Derek Hutchinson was denied bail yesterday after prosecutors argued he posed a flight risk and a danger to the community. Hutchinson faces charges of attempted murder, aggravated assault, and federal civil rights violations. If convicted on all counts, he could face up to 40 years in prison. Marcus watched without emotion. He'd stopped feeling angry about Hutchinson weeks ago. The anger had burned out, replaced by a deeper understanding of how broken the system was. Hutchinson was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was the culture that had produced him, protected him, and enabled him until it was too late. His phone rang. General Mitchell. Marcus answered immediately. "Hey, James." "Marcus. How are you feeling today?" "Better. Physical therapy is hell, but the doctors say I'm healing faster than expected. Military training, I guess." Marcus smiled slightly. Stubborn refusal to stay down. "That sounds about right." Mitchell's voice was warm. "Listen, I wanted to let you know before you see it on the news. The Department of Justice completed their review of the Riverside Police Department. They found a pattern of civil rights violations going back 7 years. The city has agreed to a consent decree. Federal oversight for at least 5 years, complete restructuring of their use of force policies, mandatory bias training, and an independent monitor to review all use of force incidents." Marcus closed his eyes, processing the information. It was what they'd been fighting for, but it felt hollow. All those years of violations. All those people who'd suffered before him. If he hadn't been a lieutenant colonel with powerful friends, would any of this have happened? "That's good news," Marcus said finally. "What about Chief Hammond?" "Resigned yesterday. Under pressure, but resigned nonetheless. The mayor appointed an interim chief with a strong civil rights background. She's promising comprehensive reform." Mitchell paused. "It's not enough, Marcus. We both know it's not enough. But it's something." "It's more than most people get," Marcus replied quietly. "Most people who get shot like I did don't have a 2-star general and a senator making calls on their behalf. Most people don't have their story go viral. Most people just become statistics. Which is why we're not stopping here," Mitchell said firmly. "Senator Dawson is introducing legislation that would require federal reporting of all police use of force incidents involving military personnel and veterans. It's a start toward broader accountability. Your story opened a door, Marcus. A door that's been closed for too long." After they hung up, Marcus walked slowly into the living room where Sarah was folding laundry. She looked up, reading his expression immediately. "What is it?" "The Department of Justice found systemic civil rights violations in the police department. Federal oversight is coming." He sat down carefully beside her. "James says our story opened a door for change." Sarah set down the shirt she was folding and took his hand. "I'm glad something good is coming from this nightmare. But Marcus, I need to know. Are you okay? Really okay?" "Not physically. I mean," the judge, a stern black woman named Valerie Roberts, called the court to order. "We're here today for the sentencing of Derek Hutchinson, who has pleaded guilty to charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and federal civil rights violations. The attempted murder charge was dropped as part of the plea agreement. Before I pronounce sentence, I'll hear from the victim. Colonel Thompson, please approach." Marcus walked to the witness stand, every eye in the courtroom following him. He was sworn in, took his seat, and looked directly at Hutchinson for the first time since that terrible night. "Your Honor, members of the court," Marcus began, his voice steady and clear. "On the night of October 15th, I was shot by the defendant while I was taking a walk in my own neighborhood. I was unarmed. I was complying with his orders. I was doing nothing illegal. And yet, he decided that I was a threat worthy of lethal force." Marcus paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've spent 21 years serving this country. I've led soldiers in combat. I've made decisions that affected the lives of hundreds of people. I've been shot at by actual enemies of the United States. But I have never felt as helpless, as frightened, as dehumanized as I did that night when Officer Hutchinson looked at me and saw not a fellow American, not a military officer, not a husband and father, but a threat that needed to be eliminated." He looked at Hutchinson, who couldn't meet his eyes. "I want the defendant to understand something. The bullet he fired didn't just damage my lung and nearly kill me. It shattered my sense of safety. It traumatized my 8-year-old daughter. It forced my wife to explain to our child why someone sworn to protect us tried to kill me instead. It made me afraid in my own neighborhood, in my own country, the country I've spent my entire adult life defending. Marcus's voice grew stronger, more passionate. But it also did something else. It exposed a system that has failed countless people. It revealed patterns of behavior that should never have been tolerated. It sparked as the cameras flashed and the reporters shouted questions. Marcus Thompson stood tall in his uniform, a survivor, a symbol, and a reminder that sometimes justice does prevail when good people refuse to stay silent. The road ahead was long, and the fight for equality and accountability was far from over. But today, at least, was a step in the right direction. Emma tugged on his hand. "Daddy, can we go home now?" Marcus looked down at his daughter and smiled, the first genuine smile that had come easily in months. "Yeah, baby girl. Let's go home." And as they walked away from the courthouse, surrounded by family, friends, and fellow soldiers, Marcus Thompson knew that he'd survived more than just a bullet. He'd survived an injustice and lived to fight for change. And in the end, that was the most important victory of all. The end. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If Marcus's journey moved you, if it made you think about justice, accountability, and the changes we still need to make in our society, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story. And most importantly, share this video with your friends and family. Stories like this need to be told, and your support makes that possible. Drop a comment below and let us know what you thought. What would you have done in Marcus's situation? Have you or someone you know experienced something similar? We want to hear from you. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never stop fighting for what's right. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.